The keyboard clicks created a rhythm I'd memorized over 6 months. Steady, precise, the sound of someone who'd learned to be invisible. My fingers flew across the keys, transcribing the meeting notes Mr. Thornton had dictated that morning, each word committed to memory, because I discovered early that he despised repeating himself. The office smelled of expensive leather and old books, with undertones of the coffee I'd brewed at 6 a.m. sharp. Natural light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district, casting geometric shadows across my desk. I'd positioned myself here deliberately, far enough from his door to avoid constant scrutiny, close enough to respond when summoned. "Grace, did you finish the Patterson contract review?" Lucy appeared at my desk, her voice pitched low. She'd been here 3 years longer than me, had survived what she called the revolving door of secretaries by mastering the art of being competent without being memorable. "Sent it 20 minutes ago." I didn't look up from the screen, tracking a discrepancy in the shipping manifests. "He'll have it before the 2 p.m. call." "You're terrifyingly efficient." Lucy perched on the edge of my desk, her expression shifting to something conspiratorial. "So, did you hear about the merger talks?" My hand stilled. In 6 months, I'd learned that information was currency in this building. Thornton Industries operated on secrets and leverage, though I'd been too focused on mastering my job to question exactly what kind of business we conducted. "With Roberts Enterprises?" "That's the one." Lucy's eyes gleamed. "Dylan Roberts himself is supposed to visit next week. I saw his photo in the business journal. Grace, the man is absolutely gorgeous. Those eyes, that smile. Roberts is a snake." The voice came from behind us, cold and controlled, each word precisely articulated. We both froze. I felt the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees as James Thornton emerged from his office, moving with that predatory grace I'd noticed from day one, but had trained myself not to analyze. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit tailored so perfectly it might have been painted on. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone, all sharp angles and controlled intensity. His gray eyes, usually storm cloud neutral when they bothered to acknowledge my existence, were fixed on Lucy with an expression I'd never seen before. Something dark and volatile simmered beneath his trademark control. "Mr. Thornton." Lucy scrambled to her feet, face flushing. "I was just... Return to your desk." He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The words carried weight that made Lucy flee without another word. I should have been smart enough to stay silent, should have returned my attention to the manifests, maintained the professional invisibility that had kept me employed when 12 secretaries before me had lasted an average of 6 weeks. Instead, I heard my own voice, crisp and unfiltered. She was making conversation, not committing corporate espionage. His attention shifted to me like a spotlight. For 6 months, James Thornton had looked through me more than at me. I was the efficient machine that kept his schedule, answered his calls, anticipated his needs with eerie accuracy. Useful, but not particularly interesting. Now he looked at me. Really looked. And something in that gaze made my pulse jump in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "You find Roberts attractive?" Each word was measured, dangerous. I should have deflected, should have stammered something professional and retreated. But something about his tone, the barely leashed fury beneath the control, triggered a response I didn't recognize in myself. "I find him irrelevant to my job performance." I met his gaze steadily, fingers still poised over the keyboard. Though I'd hardly call basic courtesy toward a potential business partner being a snake. That seems like poor negotiation strategy. Silence, the kind that made the air feel dense. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. More like recognition of something unexpected. "My office. Now." He turned and walked back through the double doors, leaving them open. A command, not an invitation. I saved my work with hands that had developed a slight tremor, then followed him into the space I'd entered exactly 4 times in 6 months. His office was larger than my entire apartment, decorated in dark woods and deep burgundy accents. A wall of windows behind his desk, bookshelves filled with legal texts, and what I suspected were ledgers for businesses that didn't advertise their services. He stood behind his desk, silhouetted against the city skyline. "Close the door." I obeyed, mainly because my survival instincts finally kicked in. Standing here, alone with him, I realized how much larger he was than me. How completely I'd miscalculated by speaking without thinking. "In 6 months," he said, voice deceptively soft. "You've been perfectly professional, competent, efficient, forgettable. And now you defend Dylan Roberts and critique my business strategy." "I wasn't defending." I stopped, reading the warning in his posture. "I apologize if I overstepped." "You did." He moved around the desk, each step deliberate. "But you were also correct. Calling him a snake in front of staff was unprofessional." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could see the muscle ticking in his jaw. "Tell me, Grace, do you make a habit of correcting your employer?" The smart answer was no. The survival answer was to apologize profusely and retreat. Instead, I found myself tilting my head, studying him with the same analytical precision I applied to contract reviews. Only when he's wrong, which, statistically speaking, is rare enough that I felt the exception was warranted. Another silence. Then he laughed, actually laughed, a sound I'd never heard from him before. Low, genuine, carrying an edge of dark amusement. "You have a tongue sharper than I expected." His eyes narrowed slightly. 6 months of perfect deference, and suddenly you're comfortable challenging me. Why? Because you were being irrational, I thought. Because watching you react with barely controlled fury to Lucy's innocent comment about another man's appearance triggered something in me that recognized the absurdity. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "It seems to happen without permission." "Interesting." He circled me slowly, assessing. "You're promoted. Effective immediately, you're my personal assistant. Your salary triples, your duties expand, and you'll accompany me to all meetings, including next week's negotiation with Roberts." My mind raced, trying to process the sudden shift. Personal assistant positions in this company had a reputation. The last 3 had quit within weeks, citing impossible demands and unreasonable expectations. "And if I prefer my current position?" "You don't get to prefer." He stopped in front of me again, close enough that I could smell his cologne, sandalwood and something darker, more expensive. "You demonstrated value beyond transcription skills. I'm utilizing it. By keeping me close enough to monitor what I say about your business rivals." The words escaped before I could stop them, my new inability to filter apparently permanent. His smile was sharp, predatory. "Among other reasons. Such as?" "You'll discover them." He returned to his desk, dismissing me with the gesture. "Clear your current projects. Anthony will brief you on security protocols this afternoon. And Grace." He looked up, those gray eyes intense. "When we meet with Roberts next week, I expect you to maintain that sharp tongue. Just direct it at him instead of me." I left his office with my heart racing and my carefully constructed professional persona in ruins. 6 months of being invisible, and one unfiltered comment about his rival had changed everything. Lucy was waiting by my desk, eyes wide. What happened? "I got promoted." I sank into my chair, trying to make sense of it. "To personal assistant." "Grace, no one survives that position. The last 3. "I know." I pulled up my calendar, already seeing the cascade of changes Anthony was implementing remotely. My schedule now mirrored James's completely. Every meeting, every appointment, every moment of his day now included me. "Why would he promote you after you defended Roberts?" That was the question, wasn't it? Because I hadn't defended Roberts at all. I'd challenged James's reaction to a woman calling another man attractive. And instead of firing me for insubordination, he'd pulled me closer. Through the glass walls of his office, I could see him on a call, his posture tense. When he glanced toward my desk, our eyes met for a fraction of a second before I looked away. "I don't know," I told Lucy, but that was a lie. I knew exactly why. I'd seen it in his eyes when he'd asked if I found Roberts attractive. I'd heard it in the controlled fury when he'd called the man a snake. James Thornton, The man who controlled half the city's underground business with calculated precision had reacted with pure, irrational jealousy. And my traitorous mouth had poked that particular beast without fear. The question wasn't why he'd promoted me. It was what he intended to do now that I was within arm's reach, unable to escape whatever game he'd decided to play. My computer pinged with a new message from Anthony. Security briefing in conference room B, 3 p.m. Don't be late. I looked at the clock. I had 45 minutes to figure out what I'd just walked into. 45 minutes to understand why being kept close by a dangerous man felt less like a promotion and more like being claimed. The security briefing lasted 3 hours and fundamentally altered my understanding of who I worked for. Anthony Wilson stood at the head of the conference table, a mountain of a man with kind eyes that didn't match his military bearing. He'd placed a tablet before me containing what he called essential protocols, a document that read less like employee guidelines and more like survival instructions. Mr. Thornton's business interests require discretion, Anthony explained, his voice gentle despite the weight of his words. What you see, what you hear, what you observe, none of it leaves this building. Not with friends, not with family, not even in your own journals. I scrolled through the tablet, reading sections that made my stomach clench. Transportation protocols, communication encryption, emergency extraction procedures, a list of approved locations for dining, shopping, existing. This is a contract for my entire life, I said quietly. It's protection. Anthony's expression softened. Ms. Mitchell, you're now positioned at the center of operations that attract attention from people who would use you as leverage. These protocols keep you safe. From who, exactly? He hesitated, choosing words carefully. From anyone who views proximity to Mr. Thornton as an opportunity. Over the following week, I discovered what that meant. The company car that now picked me up each morning wasn't just luxury, it was armored. The assistant, who appeared at my apartment building's entrance, was actually a bodyguard named Marcus, tasked with ensuring I reached the office safely. My phone had been replaced with an encrypted model that Anthony monitored remotely. Is this normal for personal assistants? I asked Lucy during a rare moment alone in the break room. She looked at me with something close to pity. Grace, the others never got this level of security. They got yelled at and quit. You got whatever this is. Whatever this was included accompanying James to meetings I'd previously only scheduled. I sat beside him in conference rooms where men in expensive suits discussed shipments and territories using language that sounded legitimate, but carried undertones I was learning to recognize. James never explained, never clarified. He simply expected me to absorb information and adapt. You're quiet during negotiations, he observed one evening as we returned to the office after a particularly tense meeting. Most people feel compelled to fill silence. Silence provides information. I kept my gaze on the tablet where I'd taken meticulous notes. When Mr. Chen paused before agreeing to your terms, his hesitation indicated pressure from someone else. When he mentioned consulting with partners, his eyes shifted left, likely lying about having full authority. James stopped walking. We were alone in the private elevator that served only the executive floor, suspended between the parking garage and the office. You observed all that? Reading people is useful when you grow up without resources. The admission slipped out before I could stop it. You learn to assess who's trustworthy and who's dangerous. It's survival. Something flickered in his expression. Interest, maybe respect. And what do you assess about me? I met his gaze, feeling that same reckless honesty that had destroyed my professional filter. That you're dangerous in ways I'm only beginning to understand. But you're also consistent. You haven't lied to me yet, even when omission would have been easier. Would you prefer I lie? I'd prefer transparency. But I'm learning that's not how your world operates. Our world, he corrected softly. You're part of it now, Grace, whether you intended to be or not. The elevator doors opened to the executive floor. It was past 8 p.m., the office empty except for Anthony stationed near the entrance. James gestured for me to follow him into his office. There's something you need to understand. He moved to the windows, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the city lights. Dylan Roberts isn't just a business rival. He's been systematically targeting my operations for 2 years, stealing contracts, poaching suppliers, spreading rumors designed to undermine trust. The merger talks are his attempt to absorb what he couldn't destroy. Why tell me this? Because next week when we meet, he'll try to charm you. He'll use that practiced smile and calculated warmth to make you feel valued, safe, special. James turned to face me, his expression hard. It's a performance designed to create leverage, and I need to know you won't fall for it. The possessiveness in his tone should have alarmed me. Instead, it triggered that sharp edge I couldn't seem to control around him. You promoted me to personal assistant to keep me away from Dylan Roberts? I crossed my arms. That's absurdly territorial. Yes. No apology, no justification, just flat honesty. I'm not a possession you can lock away from competitors. No. He moved closer, each step measured. You're an asset I'm protecting. There's a difference. Is there? I held my ground even as he invaded my space, close enough now that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a powerful man acting on irrational jealousy. There's nothing irrational about it. His voice dropped lower, intimate and dangerous. You walk into my world, demonstrate intelligence I didn't expect, and then casually mention that my enemy is hot and handsome within earshot. What did you think would happen? I thought you'd act like a professional businessman instead of... I stopped, searching for words that wouldn't get me fired. Instead of what, Grace? Challenge gleamed in his eyes. Say it. Instead of a jealous lover who has no claim to be jealous. The words hung between us, reckless and true. For 3 seconds he said nothing. Just looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Then he stepped back, deliberately creating space. You're right. I have no claim. Yet. He returned to his desk, the moment broken, but Roberts will try to create vulnerability where none should exist. I'm ensuring he fails. By controlling every aspect of my life? By keeping you safe from people who would use you to hurt me. He met my gaze steadily. If that bothers you, there's the door. I won't force you to stay. It was the first time he'd offered me a choice, and we both knew it was a test. I thought about the security protocols, the armed car, the constant monitoring. I thought about Anthony's gentle warning that proximity to James attracted danger. I thought about the meetings I'd attended, the careful language, the business that operated in shadows. I should have walked away. Should have reclaimed the invisible, simple life I'd had 6 months ago. I'll stay, I heard myself say. On one condition. His eyebrow rose. You're negotiating? You told me to maintain my sharp tongue. Consider this practice. I moved to his desk, placing my hands flat on the polished surface. If I'm risking my safety by association with you, then you stop treating me like a possession you're protecting from theft. I'm a person making informed choices. Respect that, or I walk regardless of how dangerous it might be. For a long moment, he studied me. Then, impossibly, he smiled. A real smile that transformed his face from coldly handsome to genuinely attractive. Deal. He extended his hand across the desk. I shook it, feeling the warmth of his palm against mine, the controlled strength in his grip. When I tried to pull back, his fingers tightened just slightly, holding me in place. Grace? His voice was soft, almost gentle. For the record, I'm very glad you stayed. He released me, but the warmth of his touch lingered long after I left his office. That night, as Marcus drove me home through streets I was no longer allowed to walk alone, I pulled up Dylan Roberts' photo on my encrypted phone. Lucy was right. He was objectively attractive, polished, charming, with the kind of practiced smile that probably disarmed most people. But when I thought about him, I felt nothing. When I thought about James's hand holding mine across his desk, I felt everything. I was in terrible trouble, and I'd walked into it with my eyes wide open. The memory came without warning while I was reviewing contracts at 2 a.m., unable to sleep. 6 months ago, before Thornton Industries, I'd been working double shifts at a legal temp agency, surviving on coffee and determination. The job posting had seemed too good to be true. Executive secretary position, competitive salary, immediate start. I'd applied on impulse, never expecting the callback. The interview had been conducted by Anthony, not James. He'd asked strange questions about my family ties, none, parents deceased. My social circle, minimal, friends scattered across the country. My attachments to the city, professional only, willing to relocate if needed. At the time, I'd thought it odd. Now I understood he'd been assessing how few people would notice if I disappeared. I'd met James exactly once before accepting the position. He'd walked through the outer office, barely glanced at me, and told Anthony, "She'll do." No interview, no questions about my qualifications, just that dismissive assessment. For 6 months, I'd been furniture, useful, efficient, invisible, until I wasn't. My phone buzzed, a message from James at 2:17 a.m. "You're awake." Not a question. The security system on my building had been upgraded 3 days ago. Apparently, it reported my activities. I typed back, "Reviewing the merger contracts. Roberts' terms are too favorable to be genuine." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Come to the office. We'll discuss it." 20 minutes later, I sat across from James in his office, both of us dressed in casual clothes that felt strangely intimate. Him in dark jeans and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, showing forearms I'd trained myself not to notice. Me in leggings and an oversized sweater, feeling underdressed and oddly vulnerable. "Show me what you found." He gestured to the contracts spread across his desk. I walked him through it, the clauses that seemed reasonable on the surface, but contained subtle language that would give Roberts access to shipping routes, supplier networks, and financial records that extended far beyond the stated merger scope. "He's not trying to merge," I concluded. "He's trying to infiltrate. These clauses would let him access your entire operation within 6 months." James was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The last 3 personal assistants never read the contracts. They just filed them. The last 3 personal assistants weren't looking for ways you might be vulnerable. The honesty emerged before I could stop it. "I am." "Why?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Why do you care if my business survives?" "Because somewhere in the last week, you've become more than my employer," I thought. "Because I've started looking forward to our late-night strategy sessions. Because when you smile at my sharp comments, something in my chest tightens in a way I don't recognize." "Professional pride," I lied. "If the company collapses, my resume looks bad." His smile was knowing. "Try again." I met his gaze, feeling that reckless honesty take control. "Because you gave me a choice when you didn't have to. Because you're dangerous and territorial and probably involved in business I shouldn't ask about. But you've never been dishonest with me. Because—" I stopped, the next words too revealing. "Because what, Grace?" "Because no one's ever looked at me the way you did when you thought I found Dylan Roberts attractive." The admission hung between us, vulnerable and true. Like I mattered. Like the thought of me interested in someone else was intolerable. Silence, the kind that made my heart race. Then James stood, moving around the desk with that predatory grace. He didn't touch me, just stood close enough that I could feel his warmth, smell the sandalwood cologne that had become familiar. "You want honesty?" His voice was low, intimate. "I haven't stopped thinking about you since that moment. 6 months of you being perfectly professional, and one comment destroyed my carefully maintained distance. I promoted you because keeping you close was the only option that didn't involve admitting I developed feelings for my secretary, which would have been a spectacular lapse in judgment." My breath caught. "And now?" "Now I'm negotiating." He raised his hand slowly, giving me time to move away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The touch was gentle, deliberate. "I can offer you safety, resources, partnership in a world most people never see. What I can't offer is normalcy. If you stay, Grace, you're choosing danger. You're choosing association with a man whose business operates in shadows. You're choosing a life where armed drivers and security protocols are permanent. What are you asking me?" "I'm asking if you'll stay anyway." Not as an employee making strategic choices for her resume, but as someone who understands exactly who I am and chooses me regardless. I should have been frightened, should have recognized this as the moment to run, to reclaim whatever normal life I could salvage. Instead, I found myself studying his face. The sharp angles softened slightly by proximity, the gray eyes that held controlled intensity, but also something warmer, more vulnerable. I need to know one thing first, I said quietly. The business you conduct in those meetings, the shipments and territories discussed in careful language, is anyone getting hurt? Are you causing harm to people who don't deserve it? He could have lied. Could have told me what I wanted to hear. The world I operate in isn't kind, he said instead. I deal with people who would hurt others without hesitation. My businesses exist in spaces between legal and illegal, providing services that society pretends don't exist. Do I hurt people? Yes, but only those who threaten what's mine. I don't tolerate innocent casualties. That's not the reassurance you think it is. I know. His thumb traced my cheekbone with devastating gentleness, but it's honest. And you asked for honesty. I thought about the last 6 months, the efficiency I'd brought to his operations, the insights that had prevented what I now recognized as potentially violent conflicts. I'd been part of his world already, just too naive to recognize it. If I stay, I said carefully, I have terms. His smile was surprised, genuine. You're negotiating with me. You taught me to maintain my sharp tongue. This is me using it strategically. I stepped back, needing distance to think clearly. I want transparency. Not complete disclosure of everything you do, but enough that I understand the risks I'm accepting. I want continued choice. If I decide this world isn't for me, you let me walk away safely. And I want respect as an equal partner in decisions that affect my life. Those are reasonable terms. I'm not finished. I met his gaze steadily. And you stop using jealousy as a strategy. If we're doing this, whatever this is, you trust me or you don't. But you don't control who I speak to or how I interact with business rivals. Even Dylan Roberts? Especially Dylan Roberts. If he's as dangerous as you claim, then treating me like a possession he might steal only gives him leverage. Treating me like a partner who chooses you gives him nothing. For a long moment, James said nothing. Then he extended his hand, formal and serious. Deal. Equal partnership. Transparency within reason. And trust instead of control. I shook his hand, feeling the familiar warmth of his palm against mine. This time, when I tried to pull back, he held on, using the contact to draw me closer. Grace? His voice was soft, intimate. Thank you for choosing to stay. I haven't chosen yet, I corrected. I'm negotiating terms. There's a difference. His laugh was genuine, warm. God, you're going to be impossible to work with. You promoted me specifically because I'm impossible. I allowed myself a small smile. You don't get to complain about it now. He released my hand slowly, deliberately. The meeting with Roberts is tomorrow. Are you ready? Are you? I countered. He's going to try to charm me. You're going to have to trust that I can handle it without you going territorial. I'll trust you. His expression turned serious. But Grace, understand, Dylan Roberts is dangerous in ways beyond business competition. If he perceives you as my weakness, he'll exploit it. I need you sharp tomorrow, not charmed. I'm always sharp. I gathered the contracts, our late-night strategy session shifting back to professional territory. And I've already identified 17 ways he's trying to exploit you in these documents. I'm not easily charmed by men with predatory business practices. Good. But his eyes held something darker, more possessive. Because tomorrow, I'm introducing you as my partner, not my assistant, not my employee. That's a statement Roberts will understand completely. My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. Is that strategic positioning or something more? Both. He didn't look away, didn't soften the intensity. I told you I'm not good at normalcy, Grace. When I claim something, I mean it absolutely. I should have been frightened by the possessiveness in his tone. Instead, I felt something close to exhilaration. Then tomorrow, I said quietly, We show Dylan Roberts exactly what he's up against. James's smile was sharp, dangerous, and entirely focused on me. Welcome to the game, partner. I left his office at 4 a.m., knowing I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I'd chosen partnership with a dangerous man, negotiated terms that acknowledged the darkness of his world, and felt my pulse jump at the thought of being claimed by him. Tomorrow, I'd face Dylan Roberts and prove I could handle the danger I'd chosen. Tonight, I'd lie awake, wondering when exactly I'd fallen for the man everyone else feared. Dylan Roberts was exactly as polished as his photographs suggested. Tall, blonde, with the kind of practiced charm that probably disarmed most people within minutes. He arrived at our office with an entourage of 2 assistants and a lawyer, all smiles and carefully rehearsed warmth. James, good to see you. His handshake was firm, his suit impeccable. Then his attention shifted to me, blue eyes assessing with calculated interest. And this must be the brilliant assistant I've heard so much about. Grace Mitchell. I shook his hand briefly, professionally. Mr. Thornton's partner. The word landed exactly as James had intended. Roberts's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, there and gone so quickly anyone else might have missed it. But I'd spent a week learning to read micro-expressions in high-stakes negotiations, and I caught the flash of irritation before he smoothed it away. Partner, Roberts repeated, glancing at James with raised eyebrows. That's quite a promotion from secretary. You work fast. Grace earned the position. James's voice was controlled, but I felt his hand settle briefly at the small of my back. Possessive. Claiming. Shall we discuss the merger terms? I believe my partner identified several areas requiring clarification. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Roberts was smooth, deflecting my pointed questions about the contract clauses with practiced ease. But I'd spent the night memorizing every word, every implication, and I didn't let him evade. Clause 17 gives you access to shipping manifests for quality assurance purposes, I said, sliding the relevant page across the conference table. But the language is broad enough to include proprietary route information and supplier networks. That's not quality assurance. That's competitive intelligence gathering. Roberts's smile never wavered. You're very thorough, Ms. Mitchell. Perhaps too thorough for what should be a straightforward business arrangement. Thoroughness is how I provide value. I met his gaze steadily. Mr. Thornton doesn't tolerate vulnerabilities in his operations. I identify them before they become problems. How fortunate for him. Roberts leaned back in his chair, studying me with open interest. Tell me, Grace, how did someone with your analytical skills end up working for Thornton Industries? Your background suggests legal training, yet here you are, reviewing shipping contracts. It was a trap. An attempt to suggest I was overqualified, underutilized, possibly open to better offers. I felt James tense beside me, but he said nothing, trusting me to handle it. I'm exactly where I choose to be, I said simply, working with someone who values intelligence over charm. Roberts's laugh was genuine, direct. I appreciate that. He glanced at James. You've trained her well. I didn't train her. James's voice carried an edge. She arrived with sharp instincts. I just gave her space to use them. The rest of the meeting proceeded with careful politeness, both men negotiating with words that carried multiple meanings. I took meticulous notes, marking every clause that required revision, every verbal agreement that would need documentation. Finally, Roberts stood, signaling the end. I'll have my team incorporate the suggested changes. Though I must say, Grace, you've made this significantly more complicated than it needed to be. Complicated often means protected, I replied, gathering my materials. Mr. Thornton appreciates protection. I'm sure he does. Roberts extended his hand to James. We'll reconvene next week. And Grace? He turned to me with that practiced smile. If you ever tire of being Thornton's watchdog, my organization could use someone with your talents. I pay exceptionally well. The offer hung in the air, deliberate and provocative. I'm not motivated by money alone, I said carefully. Loyalty matters more. Does it? His eyes flickered between James and me, reading dynamics I wasn't sure we'd successfully hidden. How refreshing. Most people in our world find loyalty negotiable. After Roberts left, James and I remained in the conference room. Anthony appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "We have a problem," he said quietly. Roberts had surveillance equipment in his briefcase. Nothing we didn't detect and scramble, but he was recording the entire meeting. My stomach dropped. He wanted documentation of our objections. He's going to use it to prove we're not negotiating in good faith, James finished, or to identify which specific operations we're trying to protect. He looked at Anthony. "Increased security protocols. I want Grace's apartment swept daily, her movements monitored more closely." "Already in progress," Anthony confirmed. "Ms. Mitchell, I'll need you to relocate temporarily. Your current residence is too exposed." "Relocate where?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "My penthouse has a guest suite," James said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's the most secure location we control. You'd have privacy, independence, but also protection that keeps me close enough to monitor," I finished. "This is about control, not safety." "This is about Roberts identifying you as leverage." James's voice hardened. "He just offered you a job, Grace, not because he values your skills, but because taking you from me would be a strategic victory. I need you somewhere he can't reach." I should have argued, should have insisted on maintaining my independence, my boundaries, my life outside his orbit. But I'd seen Robert's eyes when he'd looked at me. Calculated assessment, nothing more. I was a chess piece to him, valuable only for the damage my removal from James's side would cause. "Fine," I said quietly. "Temporary relocation. But I want that guest suite to actually be mine. No surveillance, no monitoring my activities when I'm off the clock." James exchanged a look with Anthony, who nodded slightly. "Agreed. The suite is yours, completely private. I'll have Marcus coordinate the move." That evening, I stood in what was now my temporary home, a sprawling suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, decorated in soft grays and creams that somehow felt both luxurious and comfortable. My few belongings looked lost in the massive space. A knock on the door. James changed from his suit into dark jeans and a casual shirt that made him look younger, less intimidating. "Everything you need?" he asked, staying carefully in the doorway. "More than I need." I gestured at the opulence surrounding me. "This is excessive for temporary housing." "You're not temporary." The words emerged quiet, waited. "Grace, I need you to understand something. Roberts's interest in you isn't going to fade. If anything, it'll intensify now that he knows you matter to me. This arrangement, this protection, it's permanent unless you choose to leave." "And if I choose to leave?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Then I let you go. That was our agreement, but I'll also ensure you have protection, resources, a way to disappear if necessary. Because Roberts doesn't forget perceived debts or missed opportunities." I moved to the windows, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere down there was my old apartment, my old life of double shifts and careful budgeting and invisible existence. Safe, simple, forgettable. "I'm not running," I said finally. "From Roberts or from whatever this is between us." I felt him move closer, stopping just behind me. Not touching, but near enough that I could feel his warmth. "What is this between us?" His voice was soft, almost vulnerable. I turned to face him, maintaining the careful distance. "I don't know yet, but I know I'd rather figure it out here, with you, than spend the rest of my life wondering what I walked away from." His hand rose slowly, giving me time to move back. When I didn't, he cupped my face with surprising gentleness, thumb tracing my cheekbone. "Grace, I'm not good at relationships. I'm territorial, possessive, and my world is dangerous in ways you're only beginning to understand. But I swear to you, I will never lie about who I am or what I want. And what I want is you, safe, protected, and choosing to stay because you want to, not because you're trapped." I leaned into his touch, feeling the warmth of his palm against my skin. "Then stop treating this like a cage and start treating it like a partnership. Let me help navigate Roberts. Let me be useful beyond just being kept safe." "You want to engage with someone who would use you as leverage?" "I want to prove I'm not easily leveraged." I met his gaze steadily. You said you value sharp instincts. Trust mine. For a moment, he studied me. Then he smiled, genuine, warm, transforming his face. All right, partner. We play it your way. But if Roberts makes one move that threatens you, then we deal with it together. I interrupted. Not you protecting me, but us protecting each other. His thumb traced my lower lip, the touch intimate and electrifying. You're going to drive me insane. You promoted me specifically because I challenge you, I reminded him, echoing my earlier words. You don't get to complain now. He laughed, the sound low and genuine. Then, slowly, giving me every opportunity to refuse, he leaned down and pressed his lips to my forehead, a gesture that felt more intimate than any kiss. Welcome home, Grace, he murmured against my skin, even if it's just temporary. He left me standing at the windows, my heart racing and my carefully maintained boundaries thoroughly destroyed. I'd moved into my employer's penthouse, accepted protection that looked like possession, and admitted I wanted whatever dangerous thing was growing between us. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out how to use my position to neutralize the threat Dylan Roberts represented. Tonight, I'd lie in the most comfortable bed I'd ever slept in and wonder when exactly James Thornton had stopped being my terrifying boss and started being someone I couldn't imagine my life without. The city lights sparkled below, beautiful and dangerous, exactly like the man I'd chosen to trust. Living in James's penthouse revealed dimensions of him I'd never seen in the office. He played piano at midnight when he couldn't sleep. Complex classical pieces that filled the space with unexpected beauty. He cooked breakfast most mornings, moving through the kitchen with the same precision he applied to business negotiations. He had a collection of first edition books in his study that he handled with reverence usually reserved for sacred things. Surprised? He asked one morning, catching me examining a particularly rare volume of poetry. Continuously, I admitted. The man who terrifies business rivals collects romantic poetry. The world assumes dangerous men can't appreciate beauty. He took the book gently, opening it to a marked page. But beauty is what makes the danger worthwhile. He was looking at me when he said it, not the book. 2 months into our arrangement, I'd learned the truth about Thornton Industries. James controlled shipping routes that moved goods most companies pretended didn't exist, pharmaceuticals that bypassed traditional channels, luxury items that avoided import taxes, information that people paid extraordinary amounts to obtain or suppress. Not entirely illegal, but operating in spaces where law became negotiable. You're not shocked, he observed one evening, after walking me through a particularly complex operation. I've been reading between the lines since my first week. I set down the contract I'd been reviewing. I'm not naive, James. I knew your business operated in shadows. I just didn't know the specific shapes those shadows took. And now that you do, I considered the question honestly. Now I understand why you need protection protocols, why Roberts wants access to your networks, why loyalty matters more than legality in your world. I met his gaze. I also understand that you've built something that provides services people need, even if society won't acknowledge them. That's not the same as causing harm for profit. His smile was warm, genuine. You have a remarkable ability to see nuance where others see only black and white. I grew up in spaces between categories, I said quietly. Too educated for service jobs, too poor for professional positions. I learned early that the world operates in shades of gray. What I didn't mention was how completely I'd integrated into his life. How Anthony now consulted me on security decisions. How James's business partners had started directing questions to me, recognizing my authority. How I'd stopped thinking of the penthouse as temporary housing and started calling it home. How I'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with a dangerous man who collected poetry and played midnight piano and looked at me like I was the most valuable thing in his carefully controlled world. The realization had come gradually, then all at once. Watching him negotiate a complex deal with patience I never saw directed at anyone else. Feeling his hand find mine under the conference table during tense meetings. Waking to find he'd left coffee exactly how I liked it with a note. Thought you might need this. Jay. I hadn't told him. Wasn't sure how to articulate that somewhere between his jealous reaction to Dylan Roberts and his gentle forehead kiss. Good night, I'd stopped being his assistant and become someone who couldn't imagine existing separate from him. Then, 8 months after that fateful comment about Roberts, everything changed. I was reviewing shipping manifests when my encrypted phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Anthony had drilled into me never to answer unrecognized calls. But something made me pick up. Grace Mitchell. Dylan Roberts' voice, smooth and confident. We need to talk. My blood went cold. How did you get this number? I have resources James doesn't know about. Listen carefully. I have information about Thornton Industries' pharmaceutical routes. Enough to trigger federal investigations that would dismantle his entire operation. Enough to send him to prison for 20 years. My hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? A meeting. You and me, alone. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the Riverside Cafe. If you tell James, if you bring security, I release the information immediately. Come alone, and we discuss how to make this problem disappear. You're bluffing. Am I? His voice hardened. Your loyalty is admirable, Grace. But is it worth watching him lose everything? Think about it. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Don't be late. The call ended. I sat frozen, mind racing through possibilities. Roberts was bluffing. He had to be. But what if he wasn't? What if he'd actually found leverage that could destroy James? I should have told James immediately. Should have trusted our partnership, our agreement about transparency. Instead, I spent 18 hours analyzing every angle, every option, every potential outcome. By the time 2 p.m. approached the next day, I'd made my decision. I told Anthony I needed to run a personal errand. Met Marcus outside the building and quietly lost him in the crowded shopping district, using evasion techniques I'd learned from watching James's security protocols. Arrived at Riverside Cafe alone, scanning for Roberts. He sat at a corner table, looking relaxed and confident. Grace, I'm impressed you came. What do you want? I remained standing, refusing to sit, refusing to make this comfortable. I want to know what you're worth to him. Roberts gestured to the chair. Sit. Let's negotiate. I don't negotiate with people who threaten the people I care about. Care about. His smile was knowing. That's interesting phrasing. Does James know you care about him? Or are you still pretending this is professional partnership? Whatever this is, it's none of your business. It became my business when Thornton made you his weakness. Roberts' expression hardened. Here's the situation. I have documentation of illegal pharmaceutical shipments, routes, suppliers, payment records, everything federal prosecutors need to dismantle his operation. I'm offering to make it disappear. In exchange for what? You, working for me instead. Your analytical skills, your insights into Thornton's operations, your charming habit of identifying vulnerabilities. He leaned back, confident. Come work for me, Grace. Double your current salary, better position, and James gets to keep his empire. Everyone wins. I stared at him, processing the audacity. You think I'd betray him for money and a job title? I think you're smart enough to recognize a good deal. And if you refuse, James loses everything anyway. At least this way, he survives. My phone buzzed. A text from James. Where are you? I looked at Roberts, at his practiced smile and calculated confidence, and realized something crucial. He'd made a fundamental miscalculation. No, I said simply. No. His smile tightened. Grace, you're not understanding. I understand perfectly. You're trying to leverage me because you think I'm James's weakness. But you're wrong. I pulled out my phone, typing a message to James with deliberate calm. I'm not his weakness. I'm his partner. And partners don't betray each other for threats from men who are too weak to compete legitimately. I hit send, watching Roberts' expression shift from confidence to fury. You just made a serious mistake, he said quietly. Did I? Because in about 3 minutes, James will arrive here with Anthony and probably 6 other security personnel. And whatever documentation you think you have, you're about to lose the element of surprise. I met his gaze steadily. You gambled that I'd value his safety over our partnership. You lost. He'll lose everything. Then we'll lose it together. That's what partnership means. 3 minutes later, exactly as I'd predicted, James appeared in the cafe entrance with Anthony and 4 others. His expression when he saw me sitting across from Roberts was complex: fury, fear, relief, all battling for dominance. He crossed the space in 6 strides, his hand immediately finding my shoulder. Are you hurt? I'm fine. I stood, moving to his side naturally. Roberts claims he has information about pharmaceutical routes. I came to assess if he's bluffing. And? James's voice was deadly quiet, his attention fixed on Roberts. He's desperate, I said calmly. Desperate men make threats they can't back up. Roberts stood slowly. You're making assumptions you can't afford, Thornton. I have evidence. No, you don't. James's smile was sharp, dangerous. Because if you did, you wouldn't need Grace to defect. You'd have already used it. This was a test to see if she could be turned. She answered definitively. I felt his hand tighten on my shoulder, possessive and proud in equal measure. This isn't over, Roberts said quietly. Yes, it is. James's voice carried absolute certainty. You threatened what's mine. There are consequences for that. I suggest you leave the city, Dylan. Quickly. Roberts looked between us, calculation finally giving way to recognition of defeat. He left without another word. In the car driving back to the penthouse, James said nothing. Just held my hand with white-knuckled intensity, his jaw tight. Finally, in the privacy of our home, he turned to me. You could have been killed. Roberts could have had people there. Could have used you as actual leverage. Could have... His voice cracked. Grace, why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to prove something. I faced him steadily. To him and to you. That I'm not a weakness you need to protect. I'm a strength you can trust. Partners assess threats together, but sometimes one partner needs to handle things alone. Never again. He pulled me against him, his arms wrapped around me with desperate strength. Never go into danger alone again. We're partners, Grace. That means we face everything together. I felt tears prick my eyes, my face pressed against his chest. I scared you. Terrified me. Absolutely terrified me. His hand stroked my hair gently. I love you, Grace. I've loved you since you called me territorial and irrational, maybe before. And the thought of losing you to Roberts or anyone else. I pulled back enough to see his face, to see the vulnerability in his eyes that he'd never shown anyone else. I love you too, I whispered. That's why I went, because I couldn't bear watching him destroy what you've built. He kissed me then, not gentle, not tentative, but desperate, and claiming and perfect. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Never again, he repeated softly. Promise me. I promise. Together from now on. Together, he agreed. Always. Roberts's threat hadn't been empty after all. 3 days after our confrontation at Riverside Cafe, federal agents appeared at Thornton Industries with warrants for financial records, shipping manifests, and communications archives. Roberts had released his documentation, not to destroy James, but to create chaos that would occupy resources and attention. While James dealt with lawyers and investigators, Roberts made his actual move. I was working late in the penthouse when Anthony burst through the door, his usually calm expression fractured with alarm. Ms. Mitchell, we have a situation. Roberts has people outside the building. They're not moving yet, but we've identified at least 6 surveillance positions. He's planning something. My blood went cold. Where's James? Downtown with the legal team. I've already sent Marcus to retrieve him, but it'll be 40 minutes minimum. Anthony moved to the windows, closing the electronic blinds with swift efficiency. We're securing the building, but I need you in the safe room now. The safe room? It's protocol for this level of threat. Please, Ms. Mitchell. The safe room turned out to be a reinforced suite, hidden behind James's study. Communications equipment, supplies for a week, and walls thick enough to withstand almost anything. Anthony sealed me inside with instructions to stay silent and wait. I lasted 15 minutes before the monitoring system showed what was happening outside. Roberts's people had breached the building's lower floors. Not attacking, just positioning. Creating a perimeter that would make escape impossible. My phone buzzed. An encrypted message from Roberts himself. "Tell James I'll withdraw my people and my federal evidence in exchange for one thing. You. Walk out of that building alone. Come work for me as we discussed. And this ends. You have 30 minutes to decide." He'd played the long game perfectly. The federal investigation kept James occupied and distracted, while Roberts positioned for his real objective. Me. I could wait for James to arrive. Trust that his security and resources would eventually resolve this. Stay safe in my reinforced box while the men in my life battled over who controlled my future. Or I could make a choice. I pulled up the building's security system, studying Roberts's positions. 6 men, strategically placed but not overwhelming. Anthony had 20 personnel in the building, ex-military trained. If I walked out, Roberts's people would withdraw peacefully. No violence, no federal escalation, just a quiet trade. But I'd also be trading myself for temporary peace, abandoning partnership for capture, choosing safety over everything James and I had built. I opened the safe room door. Anthony appeared immediately. "Ms. Mitchell, you need to—" "I know what Roberts wants," I interrupted, "and I know the smart play would be to wait for James. But I also know that every minute we waste gives Roberts more time to position. So here's what we're doing instead." Over the next 10 minutes, I outlined my plan. Anthony's expression shifted from alarm to reluctant admiration. "James is going to kill me for allowing this," he muttered. "James is going to kill both of us," I corrected. "But he'll also understand why it had to be this way." 15 minutes later, I walked out of Thornton Industries' front entrance, alone and apparently unarmed. Roberts's car waited at the curb, door open in invitation. Dylan Roberts himself stepped out, his expression triumphant. "Grace, I knew you'd make the rational choice." "Did you?" I stopped 10 feet away, maintaining distance. "Because the rational choice would be staying safe while the men fight over me. This is something different." "Semantics. You're here, which means Thornton loses." He gestured to the car. "Shall we?" "Not yet." I pulled out my phone, keeping movements slow and visible. "First, you're going to call off your federal investigation. Withdraw the evidence. Make it disappear. After you're secured. I'm not a fool, Grace. Neither am I." I smiled, showing teeth. "You think you've won because I walked out here alone, but you made a crucial miscalculation." "And what's that?" "You assumed I needed James's protection to be dangerous." Behind Roberts, his 6 positioned men began dropping, not violently, just quietly succumbing to the fast-acting sedative Anthony's snipers had administered through air-pressurized darts. Military grade, untraceable, effective within 90 seconds. Roberts spun, reaching for his weapon, but Anthony was already there with 4 others. Disarming him, securing him, all with practiced efficiency. "You see," I continued, voice steady despite my racing heart. "James taught me that power isn't about protection. It's about information and timing. I had both. You had overconfidence." Robert stared at me with fury and grudging respect. "Thornton will come for me anyway. This solves nothing. Actually, it solves everything." I stepped closer, letting him see the determination in my eyes. "You're going to withdraw your federal evidence completely and permanently. You're going to leave this city and never return. And in exchange, you get to walk away from this alive and free. Because James wanted to kill you for threatening me. I'm offering mercy instead." "Why would I accept that?" "Because the alternative is that I let James do what he planned. Dismantle your entire organization piece by piece until there's nothing left. He has the resources and motivation. I'm the only thing stopping him." I paused. "Consider this a negotiation, Dylan. My mercy for your withdrawal. It's a better deal than you deserve." For a long moment, Roberts said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. "You've changed since that first meeting. Become more like him." "No," I corrected softly. "I've become more like myself." I just needed someone who valued that enough to let it develop. Anthony's people secured Roberts' documentation, verified its destruction, and escorted him to a car that would take him to the airport. I watched from the building entrance as his threat evaporated into the night. James arrived 20 minutes later, rushing from his car with an expression that mixed fury and fear. "Grace, what the hell? Anthony said you—" I cut him off with a kiss, fierce and claiming in everything I felt. When we broke apart, his hands were shaking as they framed my face. "You handled Roberts," he said quietly. "Alone. With Anthony's support, with your resources, with everything you taught me about power and timing." I met his eyes steadily. "But yes, I handled it. Because I'm not your weakness to protect. James, I'm your partner to trust." He kissed me again, desperate and grateful. "I love you. I'm furious with you for the risk you took, and I'm so goddamn proud I can barely breathe. And I love you." "I love you too." I let him hold me, feeling his heart race against mine. "And I'm done running from danger, or letting others fight my battles. If I'm choosing this life with you, then I'm choosing all of it. The danger, the decisions, the consequences. Together," he murmured against my hair. "Everything together from now on." "Everything," I agreed. 2 years later, I stood in the same penthouse wearing a simple white dress, James beside me in a perfectly tailored suit. Anthony served as witness along with Lucy, who'd become one of my closest friends despite her initial prediction that I wouldn't survive as personal assistant. "I can't believe you're actually marrying your boss," Lucy whispered before the brief ceremony. "This is like something from a romance novel." "Except messier," I replied, "and more dangerous, and infinitely more complicated." "But worth it?" I looked at James, who was talking quietly with Anthony about some business matter he'd handle after our honeymoon. His empire had shifted over 2 years, more legitimate operations, fewer shadow dealings, a gradual transformation toward businesses that could withstand scrutiny. Not because the world demanded it, but because I'd asked. Because partnership meant compromise. He felt my gaze and looked up, his expression softening in that way it only did for me. In public, he was still the terrifying James Thornton, who controlled half the city's underground networks. In private, he was the man who played midnight piano and collected poetry, and looked at me like I was the most precious thing in his carefully controlled world. "Definitely worth it," I said. The ceremony was simple, our vows honest. I promised to challenge him, to stand beside him through whatever dangers our life together brought, to never stop being the sharp-tongued woman who'd accidentally provoked his jealousy with an innocent comment about his rival. He promised to trust my strength, to respect my choices, to build a life where partnership mattered more than protection. "You may kiss your bride," the officiant announced. James pulled me close, his kiss claiming and tender in equal measure. When we broke apart, he whispered against my lips, "Still can't believe you find Dylan Roberts attractive." I laughed, the sound genuine and joyful. "I never said that. Lucy did. I just didn't contradict her fast enough. You let me think. For 8 months. I let you reveal exactly who you were beneath the control." I traced his jaw gently. "A man territorial enough to promote me, possessive enough to keep me close, and eventually trusting enough to let me handle threats myself. I saw all of you, James, and I chose all of you." His smile was soft, vulnerable. "Best choice you ever made." "Second best," I corrected. "The best choice was telling you off for being irrational that first day. Everything else just followed naturally." Anthony cleared his throat. "The car is ready for the airport whenever you are. We'd planned a simple honeymoon, 2 weeks in Italy, far from business and danger and the complicated world we navigated daily. Just us, learning to be married after years of learning to be partners." "Ready, Mrs. Thornton?" James offered his arm with mock formality. "Ready, Mr. Thornton." I took his arm, feeling the rightness of the moment settle into my bones. As we left the penthouse that had become our home, I thought about the journey from that first overheard comment to this moment, how an innocent observation about a business rival's appearance had triggered jealousy that became possession, that became partnership, that became love. How I'd gone from invisible secretary to protected assistant to trusted partner to beloved wife. Each transformation bringing me closer to the woman I'd always been beneath the surface. How James had gone from terrifying boss to possessive protector to equal partner to devoted husband, his carefully maintained control cracking to reveal the man who collected beauty and played midnight music and loved me with an intensity that still took my breath away. "What are you thinking?" he asked as we settled into the car. "That I'm glad I commented on Dylan Roberts being handsome," I said honestly, even though I never actually thought that. "Because without that comment, you might never have noticed me." His laugh was warm, genuine. "Grace, I noticed you the day you walked into my building for your interview. I just didn't let myself acknowledge it until you gave me an excuse. So the jealousy was permission to stop pretending you were just another employee." He laced his fingers through mine. "You were never just anything, Grace. You were always going to be everything. I just needed that moment of irrational jealousy to admit it." I leaned against his shoulder, feeling the car carry us toward whatever future we'd build together. A future with danger and partnership and love that had grown from the most unlikely beginning. "For what it's worth," I murmured, "you're significantly more attractive than Dylan Roberts ever was. Only significantly? Devastatingly. Impossibly. Annoyingly so, actually, given how much time I spent trying not to notice." His arm tightened around me. "I love you, Grace Thornton. I love you too, even when you're being territorial and irrational." "Especially then," he corrected with a smile. And as the car merged into traffic, carrying us toward our honeymoon and the rest of our complicated, dangerous, perfect life together, I couldn't help but think that sometimes the best love stories began with innocent comments that triggered not-so-innocent jealousy. Sometimes partnership grew from possession, and trust emerged from control. Sometimes the terrifying boss became the devoted husband, and the invisible secretary became the irreplaceable partner. And sometimes, just sometimes, happily ever after looked like two people who'd chosen each other despite every logical reason not to, and built something beautiful from that choice. What began with an innocent comment heard through the wrong door became a love story neither of them expected. Grace's sharp tongue awakened something in James he'd kept buried, and his protective jealousy revealed a man worth trusting beneath the dangerous exterior. Sometimes the most powerful love grows from the most unlikely spark. A misunderstood compliment, a possessive reaction, and two people brave enough to choose partnership over safety. If this story of unexpected connection and hard-won trust resonated with you, I'd love to see that heart button turn red. And I'm curious, have you ever had a moment where something you said accidentally changed the entire direction of a relationship? Share your story in the comments below.